Rick, do you want to maybe just kind of start off and kind of introduce yourself and kind of give an overview of kind of the origin of City BBQ and your story for our listeners?
Hey, thanks, Rich. It's good to be here. The story of City BBQ started about 23 years ago with a crazy idea, and I wanted to start a barbecue joint. And at the time, I was working for a big company, John Deere company, marketing tractors and combines. So the segue, the move into the barbecue business is quite a natural one to go from tractors and combines to a barbecue joint. But it was for about 12 hours until I pitched the idea to my wife, Bonnie, and then it became we very quickly. And that was back in 1998 when we got the idea. And so we had a problem. I didn't know how to run a restaurant. I'd never worked in a restaurant. Minor detail that one should not overlook when they're going to put their life savings into a restaurant company. So what we did do is I call it the three-legged stool. I found a fella, and we became early partners by the name of Frank Pizzo, and he was a district guy with Burger King's, and he knew how a cash register worked, and he knew a lot of process flow and so forth, and how to operate a restaurant. And then the other thing is we needed a barbecue cred. I like to smoke in my backyard, and I would dabble here and there, but I wasn't what I would call a credible barbecue master at the time. But I was able to pair up with the Barbecue Boys team. It was a competition cooking team. And so that was the third leg of the stool. And they became minority partners in the business. Frank and I were the only dumb enough to quit our day jobs and to go into it full steam. But in '99, it was basically, first of all, Bonnie and I, we did not come from, money, if you will. So we were literally taking our all the money we had saved at that point. We were about 35 years old at the time. We double mortgaged the house and I guess loaded up the credit cards. I remember applying for a lot of credit cards while I still had a job, so I could have big credit lines because obviously they don't want to give you a credit card once you don't have a job. And so we did all of that to get going. And one of the best anecdote stories on getting started was we found an old donut shop in Upper Arlington, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. And in this old donut shop, we were kind of refabbing it, trying to get it going. And they found that all of the plumbing was just decimated below the floor, just completely wiped out. And I didn't have any money left. And at this time, we had been catering literally out of my garage, where I lived in a subdivision in Dublin, Ohio, and I had a smoker in my driveway. I would go to my neighbors with side dishes so we could use their ovens to bake things. And then we would all meet back in my driveway, pack up a van. Actually, it was a Silverado pickup at the time, as I think about it, and go do these catering jobs just so I could get a little bit of income at the time. But we were almost to a restaurant open, and this plumbing issue completely was destroyed. All the pipes were destroyed below the floor. So it's going to be like $15,000 to fix it. And I was out of money, and I called my dad, who's a farmer in Kansas, and he doesn't have $15,000 laying around, but I asked him if he could give me a loan. And he said, yeah, I'll help you out. And that kind of got us over the hump to get open. So we opened the first City BBQ location in 1999. And what we always did is we always focused on people and product, I would say. We were all about the food that we served and the people that served it, because the building we were in was not a fancy building. It was not a great one. It had old barn board from my wife's farm in Tennessee. A barn was falling down, and Frank and I went down and hauled the wood back up one day and put it up on the walls to give it some kind of decoration. We didn't realize how trendy we were at the time, but we were just trying to get something on the walls. And then we got over that hump, got open, and then we went and looked at tables. I remember this. Tables cost like $170 a piece. And Frank and I are like, what in the world? Maybe we should just build some. So we went to a used restaurant warehouse and found those old stands that you can find, and then went to Home Depot, bought a bunch of pine board, and just made the tables ourselves for like $25 a piece. And those tables are still in the first restaurant in Arlington.
Wow.
So we opened.
You
we
stopped making the
got
tables
going.
though, right?
After restaurant 2, we farmed that out. We didn't make the tables anymore. So that's a quick history of City Barbecue, and then we got the first one open, and then you just kept working hard. And one of the most gratifying things about starting a business is when it's an amazing satisfaction when people open their wallets and give you money for what you're doing, whether you're selling food, in which we were, or you probably can imagine that, Rich, if you're doing a consulting job or something of that nature. When people are willing to open their wallets and give you money for what you do, that is just a lot of fun, and that's an enjoyable thing. So a lot of satisfaction in that. And then we kind of what in the world? Hey, I'm on a podcast.
Oh, okay. I know where you
That's okay. We never know what we're going to get.
Yeah. I just the UPS guy is pounding on the door. Anyway, so where were we?
So you kind of gave us the quick summary.
And then we built one, and then we built 2, and then we just kind of kept going from there. And now the company, we're at about 52 locations across 8 states.
52 locations. And how many states?
8.
8 states. So, Rick, there's a lot of people that reach out to us about, they want to open up their own restaurant, or they want to create a brand, and they want to see it grow and scale. I mean, what do you feel like, as you kind of reflect back, what do you feel like was the secret ingredient? I mean, I'm sure, and I know you've always been a very modest, humble person, and will say like, oh yeah, it's a little bit of luck. And I mean, sure, there's always gonna be a little bit of luck, but what do you feel like, was there anything that like focusing on, or was there any kind of decisions that were like tipping points? Like, what is it that you feel was like the key to the success over the years?
Well, it was, first of all, I'll tell you, when I was thinking of starting a restaurant, I was walking through a restaurant equipment place, just kind of looking around and looking at equipment. I met this guy who worked there, and he was a veteran in the restaurant business. And I said, what advice would you give me for starting a restaurant? And he said, well, the best advice I can give you is to go home and pour 3 fingers of vodka, drink it until the feeling passes. And so that was his advice. So maybe I should give that advice to others that want to start a restaurant. But it's really, I don't know if it's a secret ingredient or not. As my wife walks behind me on the podcast here, but I don't know if it's a secret ingredient or not. But really, what we focused on every day at City Barbecue was the quality of the product and the people serving it. And if I was going to give, I don't know if there's advice I can give, but if anybody wants to start a business or do anything, the biggest point I will give them is do something every single day to move you in the direction of that goal. Do something. It could be as small as looking up a website, or checking out a potential competitor, or if it's a restaurant, finding a recipe, whatever it is. Don't let a day go by that you don't do something to move you in the direction of that goal. And, a lot of folks say, well, you got to do all this market research and things and so forth. It's always good to do that, but really we didn't. I just figured there's got to be 500 people in Columbus, Ohio that like this kind of barbecue. And so we threw the doors open. So maybe you shouldn't follow my advice in some ways. But also you want to, a lot of folks will try to start a business, and they'll try to get all this funding and do so forth. And they forget about the fact that they're serving a product, whatever that product may be. And at the end of the day, nothing matters until the cash register rings. And that's a metaphor for any business. You got to get the cash register ringing. And that's one thing we really focused on at City Barbecue was we didn't sit there and put up fancy tables and extend ourselves and go to anybody and say, hey, we're going to have 5 of these in 3 years or anything of that nature. We just said, we're going to serve really good barbecue, and we're going to put our noses to the grindstone and make sure that we serve every guest and do it well. So those are just some initial things as we looked at starting. But what I see too is a lot of folks do not. I've had so many people pitch me great ideas, and they will have those great ideas, and then just nothing ever happens. And it's a major difference between enacting and acting upon a great idea and not. It's as simple as that. So many people have great ideas, but they find reasons not to do it, or they don't spend that 2 minutes a day working on that idea, and it just kind of goes away.
I think you've got to have that motivation, that passion behind what you're doing too. And I think a lot of people who go into the restaurant world or want to open their own business, they really have to have that motivation, which it sounds like you had when opening City BBQ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. Anybody in the restaurant business knows it's not an easy thing, and we just went in, and probably one of my biggest advantages was I didn't know the restaurant business, as ironic as it sounds, because we would go in and, for example, we were going to hire our team, and Frank kind of came from this mentality of, well, what's the minimum wage in the area and what do we need to do? And I went in and said, what minimum wages are relevant to me. We're going to pay the most we can because we want to hire the best folks we can and get the best service. And so we really, I guess I broke a lot of rules without knowing what the rules were, and it tended to work for us. And so it was tough in the beginning, though. For probably the first 3 or 4 years, every Monday, or every other Monday rather, I would look at the bank statement online and see if we had enough money to make payroll. It was never easy, and there's always that sweat out there and making sure that cash register keeps ringing. And one of the toughest things and a great lesson is folks sometimes get over their skis, and I did. When we had the first restaurant, we were booming. We were rocking. The public really embraced us. They were coming to us. Now, we were serving pretty good barbecue, and we were selling a lot of it. We didn't know how to make money doing it. Our food costs were off the chart. Our labor was off the chart. We bought more bottles of root beer than we sold, if you know what that means. So we were buying more beer than we sold. And so, but I was really cocky, and I said, well, we can do a second one right away. And so we opened a second location within a year of opening the first.
Wow.
And we didn't have staff in place. We didn't have the right people, the right training. And going from 1 to 2 is brutal. It's a brutal leap for any business, but when you're not even have the first one really down yet, we did that. And what happened is our sales started dropping off a little bit during the late in the season, seasonal sales drop. And the second location wasn't selling barbecue. We thought, man, we were really going to do it anywhere. We can put this thing on a farm out in the middle of Pennsylvania and it'll sell barbecue. No, we found that you still have to have a pretty decent location. And so that second one was just sucking all the cash out of the first one. And I remember it was so tight. I mentioned this in a speech to our team last week in Florida. I said, we were so tight at one time that the gas company representative showed up at the second location, and I get a phone call from the manager, and he says, hey, they're here to shut off our gas because we haven't paid the gas.
Wow.
And I remembered, well, yeah, I hadn't, because I was trying to make payroll, and that was one I was extending. So we had to dig in the cash register at the time and pay the gas bill so he could stay open.
Wow.
Because they were there to shut off the gas. So you learn a lot. And so what I would tell any entrepreneur, any new business owner, is get your fundamentals and your basics down before you worry about expanding. Get the fundamentals down. And we did not, and it darn near lost the company because we weren't thinking that way.
So get both shoes on and tied before you start running.
Yeah. We had on one shoe tied and the other was sort of halfway in, and we were stumbling. I don't know. Yeah. Good point.
Rick, I think that what you said, the first thing that you said, it was, I think it's really important for many people that they're trying to just do not the same business, but do something like that about being an entrepreneur. You were 34 years old and you put all the, like, literally everything on it and you went for it. And the other one, the question that I have is, you said that you did that the first time and you were not thinking about the labor and about the food costs and everything. Everything was like way too much. How did you open the second one?
Being naive and a little arrogant and ignorant. So we were generating cash because we were selling a lot of barbecue. Now I wasn't paying myself a salary and so forth, so that kind of helps things out too. So it covers a lot of mistakes. But our food costs, I think, if we would have really had a number on them, were in excess of 40%. Labor was out of line, but we were still generating enough cash that we felt confident that we were doing well. But in reality, we really weren't. In other words, my accounting systems weren't very good. And that came back to bite me as well.
Rick, do you think that over the last couple of years, like with the pandemic and supply chain, like, all these, the news cycle, every time you turn it on, there's some major crisis. It's almost like we're living in a movie. For years, I'm sure you had dialed in like, okay, this is the gold standard for labor costs, food costs, operational costs. Here's what our rent should be, all those different things. Do you feel like moving forward, the old restaurant metrics, like they still work for somebody that wants to get into it? Or do you have to charge more, or do you have to find different ways of doing things? I mean, I was looking the other day, we were hiring somebody as a kitchen helper, and just in conversation with the person, he just mentioned how Sheetz is paying $17 an hour, like all these benefits, and it's really getting competitive out there for which I'm glad. I mean, I have the same mentality as far as like with compensation, is like we try to pay what we can bear, like what we can do. I mean, bringing in the most talented people, there's a return on that. But it's really getting to the point now, those extra costs are even driving up what it costs for your milk and what it costs for your product to get delivered and paper goods. I mean, everything's getting so expensive. So what do you think, just in this industry, what do you kind of see for the future as far as like somebody maybe going into this? Like how should they attack it? I mean, should they try to break some rules or think differently, or what would you think?
I think we're thinking differently and breaking rules already at City BBQ. And if you would have told me we would have a drive-through someday, I would have told you were crazy. When we started, we joked about having a website. We're like, yeah, we don't need a website. That's silly. So yes, and those rules, you continually just have to adapt. And so a young, an entrepreneur, somebody wanting to get into the restaurant business, the business model has changed. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I really believe in my heart that people still want great food, and they don't want to necessarily have to cook to do it. And they want experiences. People want great experiences. That experience isn't necessarily going and sitting in a restaurant. That experience could be, hey, I'm playing video games with my cousin 3 states away, and that's my experience. Therefore, I'm going to get DoorDash and have it come in and delivered to my apartment so I can have something to eat and keep playing video game against my cousin 3 states away. And so there's so many different experiences that folks want, but they want it, and I believe they still want some great food. And so the business model you set up just has to be, well, how am I going to tailor to that? And I have an ideas folder right now. I'm old school. I don't put stuff on my computer. I still write it in a spiral notebook, but I have an ideas folder where I'm looking at, well, what are different ways to get food to people? What are things they want to eat? What do they enjoy? And I think what you have to do is sort the difference between trends and fads. I mean, there's trends that are definitely taking place, and then there's fads. And I remember going to the National Restaurant Show probably 8-9 years ago, and like huge section devoted to food trucks. And, everybody's convinced that food trucks are just going to take over the food landscape, right? And
Right.
restaurants wouldn't be around. It'd all be food trucks. You don't see a lot of I just don't see that many food trucks anymore. And the ones that open, they're kind of buying themselves a job. It's probably not the best gig for them because I've run the numbers on them. And, so now the big thing is what? Ghost kitchens. Well, that could be a trend, but it might be a fad also. We'll see how that all shakes out. But what you want to do is look at what your business model is. And we looked at our business model 22 years ago and said, we don't want to be full service. And the reason I made that decision was I looked at what the typical restaurant profitability was on full service versus fast casual. I didn't know what fast casual meant at the time. I just knew I didn't want to have servers. And you made more money in a fast casual environment. And so that's why we picked that business model, and that has worked. But that business model is no longer what we can stand by alone. Now we have to work with DoorDash, third-party deliveries, looking at geofencing when people place an order, very sophisticated apps, website, et cetera, that we've invested in. But at the end of the day, you want to pick that model, and then you got to have a product that people really, really want. I kind of chuckle where folks, they have this business, but does anybody really want the product they're selling?
Right.
And if people don't really, if it's not craveable and something they want to get over and over again, you can have the coolest website in the world, the most innovative looking signage, et cetera, or a ghost kitchen, but people aren't going to buy it because it's not craveable.
Is there like a certain amount of time you would watch a specific business model or a specific idea per se, like to figure out if it's going to be a trend or a fad before investing in it? Is there a certain amount of time you would watch? Okay, the food trucks have been around for, 10 years and they're doing great, or you want to hop on something quick. Is there a certain amount of time you would watch something to determine whether it's a fad or a trend before investing?
I think that's kind of the gut instincts of the business leader and the business owner. And I don't think there is a time frame. And here's two great examples. Not great, they're examples, I guess, but they're great because I thought of them. No, we watched the food truck thing for several years, and we did pro formas on it. Should we do it? Should we do it? And at the end, we're like going, I just don't see this being something candidly worth our time. Now, I like eating at food trucks. I have nothing against them as a customer, but for us, it just wasn't something that would work for us and who we are. And so we did watch that for a number of years and finally didn't do it. However, on another two fronts, we jumped into a ghost kitchen last year very quickly. And we also jumped into geofencing with customers being able to literally pull up to any of our restaurants, and we know what car they're driving and when they showed up, so we can run the food in it, and it's a frictionless experience. And we nailed that project in a few months. So it takes the gut instinct of the business owner and leadership to say, what's worth kind of watching and hanging back, and what are things we really need to take a risk on. And candidly, I'm going to tell you, it's been doing this, like I said, 22 years, and I thought I had the brainiest, best idea, and we would go test it, and it would be a dismal failure. And then there'd be some other idea that we thought, well, this isn't going to be much. We test it, and it's a runaway success. So the point is, you really don't know until you test and try things too.
Hey, everybody, I want to take a second to say thank you to our sponsors. This show is brought to you by the following partners. Meat and Bone. These guys are just doing an exciting thing in the Miami and Florida area. Check out their website. They offer premium quality meats hand delivered to your door if you live in the Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach area. But also they ship nationally, and you can also visit them at some of their boutique locations in the Florida area. These guys came up to our recent barbecue class, and they brought all sorts of amazing cuts of meat, steaks, brisket, Listen, if you're looking for quality steaks like you would get in a restaurant, check these guys out. They've got some incredible selection and top-notch quality. Check out their website. Also, Ovention oven. These ovens are just incredible. We've used these during the pandemic. They really helped us kind of pivot and reposition ourselves so that we were able to expand our menu without having to make expensive investments in the kitchen. These ovens offer an innovative solution to restaurant operations, opening up a whole new realm of possibilities with your menus. The Ovention ovens are ventless, they're fast, and operationally friendly in cooking. What we do is we program our recipes in the oven, and our cooks just press a button of the image of what they're going to cook. It's a whole new way of cooking. Check out their entire line of Ovention ovens. And of course, Steelite. Steelite International has remained an incredible partner of Rosendale Collective. They are an internationally world-leading manufacturer of award-winning inspirational dinnerware for the international hospitality industry. They've been a longtime partner of Rosendale Collective, and they're getting ready to sponsor us with some incredible tableware for our new section on Rosendale Online, and we can't wait to see what they're going to come up with. Also, check out Dry Ager. Dry Ager offers a level of unprecedented quality for both restaurant and home dry aging programs. They make the most amazing dry aging meat cabinets in the industry. They are designed with sophisticated technology. They're made in Germany, and you can get incomparable taste of restaurant quality steak in the comfort of your own home. Thanks again to our following sponsors: Meat and Bone, Ovention Oven, Steelite International, and Dry Ager. Now, back to the show. Rick, what about how do you forecast in the coming years the movement toward a lot of plant-based eating and stuff like that? Has that been something as a place that, you know, a pillar of what you sell is a lot of proteins? I really like a lot of restaurants, but particularly for barbecue. Do you feel like that is not as relevant as far as considering the future of the menu, or do you feel like, how do you bring some of those people in? Or do you think that the plant-based may be more of a fad, or what are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, you're going to send me down a rabbit hole, and this will be fun. So, Rich, do you think we can feed the world with Iberico ham?
Yeah,
not, right. We probably
exactly.
can't, right? It's a little too specialized. And how long do they age that stuff? 5-10 years.
Yeah, it takes. It's expensive.
So I made that off the wall comment. We'll circle back to that. So in my mind, protein, we need to feed the world protein. The world needs to have protein. And so I'll go back to my wife is Bonnie is an animal science major at University of Tennessee, and we're looking at doing giving us some support financially at University of Tennessee's meat lab. And I came back and said, I'm not sure we should call it a meat lab. I don't know if I'm into that. And it's not that I'm against beef, pork, chicken, and everything else, because I eat it myself and that's what we sell. But I said, if they're going to be innovative, they should probably name it a protein lab. And because we need to see how we can, if we're going to feed the world and we're going to get them protein, it can't just be limited to beef, pork, chicken. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, and there will always be a place for that. But candidly, beef is not the most efficient way to feed the world. It's a 7-to-1 feed ratio. It takes a couple years for an animal to be harvested. It is just not an efficient way to provide protein to the world. Now, it's a phenomenal, tasty luxury. It's wonderful. It's great in the United States, where we're so wealthy and we spend such a small percentage of our food dollar, of our disposable income, on food compared to other countries. We can afford that beef. But if you're going to feed, sub-Saharan Africa and keep them fed so they don't starve, you're not going to do it with just beef. And you're not going to do it with just pork. And you're not going to do it with just chicken. So I think we have to always be innovating and saying, what are alternative proteins can we produce? to feed this great world, knowing that, hogs and chickens and beef are always going to be in that equation, but we need to be thinking big along those lines. And so that comes back to your question on plant-based products. I think they have a fit. I haven't tasted any that I found yummy, so I'm probably not going to do it. But I think they need to be always working on that and saying, how do we produce nutritious proteins for folks so that we can get them fed? And we'll always be looking at it at City BBQ, and I'm not doing it just because I want to be faddish or popular, but we'll look at it and continue to experiment as long as it's a viable product that we can sell. Now, here at the end of the day is, what did I say earlier? We got to have a product that people want, and it has to be tasty and craveable. So that's the first priority. But yeah, I don't think the plant-based stuff is a fad. I think it's going to continue to evolve. I think it's going to become better. It's going to be better at providing proteins, and so I think it has a place out there.
Rick, over the last several years, just with like how so many things have been in the news cycle, the pandemic for one, do you feel like you've been more aware or maybe kind of anticipating how this would impact the company whenever you see things like, even just like with the whole situation with Ukraine right now and Russia, and you think about the cost of things, or, am I going to be able to, or are we going to be able to get that? Or, things that, I've seen things that prices have like tripled in some cases. I remember being at the Greenbrier, if something went up like 5%, that was kind of like, why did it go up so much? But things are like tripling now, do you feel like you've been like really monitoring or at least kind of paying more attention to things because they have impacted the operation more, and also maybe in your travels, if you see something like a new technology or those things that you're kind of thinking about, wow, if I'm not paying attention to this, I could be at a competitive disadvantage, or this event could impact what I'm paying for, brisket,
Yeah. Oh, completely. And that's my job. My job is to be looking at trends and what's going on out there and zeroing in and how it affects us, et cetera. One thing though is, as you can see, my hair's getting nice and silver. And one of my quotes is that when I was in my 30s, I thought I knew it all. When I was in my 40s, I realized I didn't know it all. And then when I was in my 50s, I realized that nobody else knows anything either. So so when I look at just at the history of City BBQ, you look at, we were open for a year and we had 9/11 and the world shut down for a while, and then we had avian flu, we had SARS, we had the Great Recession of 2007 when restaurants were just crushed, especially in the casual dining segment. And so I'm not flippant about it in terms of, what's going on in Ukraine and the inflation and especially in food costs, but I'm not going to panic either because we've seen a lot of things in the past. I reflect on a story my dad used to tell about his cousin, they were working hay during the World War II. They were kids and they were working out in the hayfield. They weren't old enough to go to join the military or be drafted. And he was bringing a pitcher of lemonade to everybody in the hayfield. And this was like liquid gold because they were rationing sugar. And they were able to take some of that rationed sugar and make a pitcher of lemonade for the guys in the hayfield that hot afternoon during World War II, right? And here's what happened. He's like 12 years old and he's carrying the pitcher of lemonade and he trips and he spills it all.
Oh God.
And they still remember that story. And what blows me away is like we go get a pitcher of lemonade and we don't even drink half of it. We throw it away. We just take that so for granted in terms of food supply and so forth. So, we've had a lot of cycles. We've had a lot of challenges in this country, and we have to look at how our leaders respond, how we respond as leaders, and how we attack these issues. And I'm very optimistic. I think, we got a lot of smart folks in this world, and we'll get past this and keep moving on. And I know as a farm kid, I grew up on a farm in Kansas, and we had in the 70s when there was wheat shortages and the oil embargoes, et cetera, driving prices up then. I mean, there's a lot of this stuff cycles. And so we have to be aware of it. We can't be naive about it, but I'm sure not going to panic about it.
I think what you said, I hope our listeners heard loud and clear. It's not, like you said, these are cycles. These are things that happen. Most of them are unpredictable. We don't see them coming. We can't prepare for them. It's not about what happened. It's about how we respond to it, how we react to it. And not panicking is probably the best thing that anybody can do, because that's what happens when we get into a crisis mode, is we end up panicking and then making not the best decisions for the company. So I hope our listeners took a little bit of advice from that, and whatever happens, don't panic. It's it happens in cycles, and you'll come out on top. And
well, Rachel, in 2007 during the recession, a lot of restaurant companies were cutting back, or they're just doing discounts, right? They were not giving as good an offering, and they were discounting the heck out of their food. And that was a cloud that hung over them for years. And we, again, I don't know if it's just because I didn't know any different, but when that started happening, we said, well, let's do this. Instead of doing discounts, why don't we enhance the experience? And so we, for example, went to real silverware, real plates in our restaurants. At the time, we were using paper. And so we enhanced the guest experience in our fast casual environment. We actually did pretty well during that 2007-8 timeframe, because we just tried to think a little bit differently and focus on the product that we serve. And right now, I tell you what, we look at our costs and our brisket costs and our pork costs, and now poultry's gone up. Everything is going up across the board. But at City Barbecue, we never talk about cutting quality. We just don't. We look at how can we be creative in our menu offerings? How can we offer some different things to give folks a City Barbecue experience? But we're not going to go buy cheap brisket. We're not going to go buy frozen chicken, because we've always had fresh chicken, for example, because you still have to have something that the guest wants and is craveable. And when we get past this and overcome it, you want to have a great brand that you can still stand on, because the brand is so important.
It's easy, though, for a lot of people to get tempted to want to water down the chowder. It's like, hey, I can save some of this. I can save on that. I'll just, especially whenever you have all these rising costs, that gets very tempting. One of the things, Rick, I mean, from knowing you over the years and spending time in a lot of the restaurants, and really have met so many great people in your organization, you really have done a great job, I feel, in creating a great culture there, like with the staff and with all the team members. And one of the things I'm seeing, especially a lot in kitchens and restaurants, really the hospitality industry, because a lot of people I know growing up in kitchens, it was very intense. It was a lot of anxiety and stress, and I've had things thrown at me and yelled at. And you're starting to see a little bit of a paradigm shift in the industry, where people are starting to say, hey, people aren't just coming to work in our kitchens anymore. We actually got to try to make things a good experience, I guess, which is puzzling, but that's really the shift that I feel like a lot of people are making. What are some of the things that you've done to really create that culture? Like how do you make it a great experience for your team, and to compel people to want to come and work there? Because I'm sure you guys have you've got a lot of restaurants, and there's a lot of positions to fill, and there's a lot of options out there for people. I mean, are there things other than just compensation, or do you just pay more? Like how do you attack that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to give you a shout out, Rich. I've watched you as a chef in a kitchen, and you defy all that old stuff. I mean, you treat your team members with respect, and you're incredibly professional. And when we've worked together, it's always been fun for our teams as well. So I'm going to give you a shout out. What we've always done at City BBQ is our purpose is to serve and create happiness. So, and we say that all the time. Your job is to serve and create happiness, and we have very key values that we lean on every day. And the very first value that trumps all the three other values is safety first. We want to provide a safe work environment, and one of our other values is to treat others with respect. And it's as simple as that. And so when we look at how we behave in our company, we go back to those values and we go back to our purpose, and the decisions become much easier. When we were going through the pandemic and then all the social unrest, it would have been easy at that time to sit there and start putting out all these statements and all these platitudes and so forth. And we as a company looked back on it and said, no, these have been our values since 1999. And we live by them. And this is the decisions we make. We're going to treat everyone with respect. Everyone has a fair shot in this company. And we didn't feel like we really had to change much. And when you look at a culture, and we got a lot of work to do. You know, we're never perfect. By the way, you never reach your goal. You get to a certain point and you can always do better. That's just natural. So when we look at our culture, I always drive home to our teams, it's about behaviors. A culture is not Blue Jeans Friday or massage days on Tuesdays. Culture is your behaviors every day, from the leaders, from the managers, and all team members. And those behaviors, if you're doing the right thing every day, that then becomes your culture. If you have a bad, toxic culture, it's simply the behaviors that have been going on for the last number of years in that particular company. And so I do feel good about who we are and what we stand for, and we don't really compromise on that. And then we also drive home that message on weekly calls. Our CEO, Mike Muldoon, he does a terrific job every week on our major call throughout the company it's literally called a cultural behavior corner, where they talk about something they did that was exhibiting the right behaviors that helps the culture. So to do that, you just have to live it and talk it every day. And the way we recruit is, candidly, everybody's paying a lot. And we're not just competing against restaurants, we're competing against Amazon. You know, we're competing against all these others. And so do you want to work for a company that pays well but has not such a great experience, or do you want to work for a company that pays well and you can have a really fun experience? And that's what we want to sell at City BBQ, to give you a place where you can grow and develop and be something better and be something more. So it's a continuous behaviors every day for 22 years that creates who we are, whether good or bad. And that's the way we look at it, and that's the way we live it.
What about a lot of people think that you obviously have so much barbecue history and the restaurants, but I'm sure you don't eat barbecue every day. What are some of the other, is there any like styles of food or cooking that you're really into right now, or just something that you've always kind of enjoyed doing? Or you kind of, would you say you like to order out a particular kind of food, or when you're cooking, you like to cook this?
Yeah, my problem is I like to eat everything, and I like about everything. That's my main problem. And I love just looking at different concepts and different restaurant concepts and seeing what they're doing, and you know, what flavors are they putting together? How interesting is it? But it candidly, at home, Bonnie and I were at home, half the time we're eating dinner over the counter. We don't really get that crazy creativeness, because we're like, you know, we got a lot of things going on. If we're going to cook something, we'll do a nice roast chicken or something just kind of simple like that, without having to make it in a major event. I'm really kind of getting into the live fire again. Live fire cooking is always fascinating to me, and it's not necessarily about cooking that I'm fascinated by. It's actually the equipment.
Yeah.
And right now I'm working with a company on developing some interesting products in that realm. And, again, innovations, doing something different, et cetera. I have to be close-lipped about it a little bit and keep the cards to the vest, if you will, on what we're doing. But those are some areas that I find really interesting to work on. But as far as just eating in general and certain type of genres of types of food, I'm pretty much game to anything except last night I had a mango octopus tartar. I guess that's what it was. Yeah, it was a mango octopus tartar. And I said, that was about as tasty as if I would have just spread some mango relish on a bicycle inner tube. That just wasn't really very good. But it's always fun to experiment and do different things. I don't know if that answers your question very well or not, but I'm kind of all over the place when it comes to food and just enjoying it.
You mentioned a lot of, over the conversation, even about innovation. You've used that word several times, and which I love. I've known you for years, and we've always had a lot of really great dynamic conversations about food and restaurants and barbecue. But I think a lot of people that maybe they cook barbecue, or they may have a Italian restaurant or whatever. And a lot of people they don't associate the word innovation with like certain styles of cooking, but you've used that. And I don't think anybody's comes into the restaurant and orders a brisket sandwich or pork, and they're just thinking like, wow, this is delicious. This is why I come back, is because it's great. It's delicious. But having conversations about how to be innovative, maybe behind the scenes, so that you can create a more consistent product, or creating as a restaurateur, figuring out how to take orders through different channels. So I feel like for anybody out there, regardless of what kind of operation you run, you really do that innovative that drive is something that it's really important, I think, in anything that you do. And it doesn't have to always be like, when we think about innovation, it doesn't have to be like coming up with some fancy dish or some unusual technique. A lot of times it could just be the way that you take orders, or the way that the things that you do in the back of the scenes that like make things taste better, or that they're more consistent.
Yeah. And it's, and I've always said pretty much from day one at City BBQ that the front of the house is a retail store and the back of the house is a factory. And so you always have to look at how does that production become better, more efficient, but also be homemade and be authentic and be real. And so that's what it is. And it's very easy to go out there and just say, we're going to bring in prepackaged food, but we don't do that.
Right.
We still want the experience to be very real and authentic. And so that creates a ton of innovation opportunities of how do you look at portioning? How do you look at making sure that the cornbread is mixed properly every time? And how do you put together lines of flow? And how do you set things up in the back? What type of equipment should we using? What kind of equipment should we be inventing? And it continues. And I think any business owner, any restaurateur needs to be looking at that all the time for their business to make sure that they're at their leading edge. And you got to be willing to make the investment in it too.
Well, I know we're we're getting close here, coming up on the hour. So I think we'll probably have time for like one more question from everyone. And then of course, Rick, if you have anything else that you want us to talk about, we certainly can. But Chris, you want to jump in? Anything?
Yeah. Before I get cut off again, I wanted to ask about the work balance. I think it's one of the most important things that people always like to talk. And talking about being an entrepreneur as you started it, I'm pretty sure there is a way that you found it, or that both of you came to an agreement, like this is what we want for our future. this is what we want to accomplish. So this is the way that we have to, this is going to be our work balance. I think that for everybody is a different work balance. It doesn't mean that, oh no, you have to be time with the kids, you have to be time with me, but it's different for everybody. So I wanted to ask that and put it out there.
Yeah, well, first of all, personally, my work balance was a disaster for a number of years when we started City BBQ, and it hurt us personally. It stressed our marriage. It was tough. And so that was just kind of the reality of it, trying to get the company going. Now it's in a very good position, and it has been for a number of years in terms of balance of work and play, et cetera. What we do in our company with our team members, and it's very easy for a general manager to get sucked into an 80-hour work week. And yeah, during the pandemic that happened, and there wasn't a whole lot we could do because we were just trying to survive during that time. However, we really stress, take all your vacation, don't work too many hours, keep that work week at about 45 hours if at all possible. And we expect you to build your team so you don't have to be there, because we have a firm belief that you can't live in the restaurant. If you do, you're just going to burn out and you're not going to be effective anyway. And your kids need to see you. So we push that very hard at City BBQ. And that's one of those old rules, right? Guys, from 20 years ago, it was like, well, you weren't a hard-working chef if you didn't work 100 hours a week. Well, we really worked hard to break those rules so that our folks can have a terrific life in addition to running a great business in their local joints or in their catering departments. So it's just important. Otherwise, what's the point of working?
Right.
All right. My one last question for you, Rick, is what is your favorite item on City BBQ menu?
I'm going to have to go to brisket. It's just years and years. It's just always been good. It's just always a great item. And I love our French fries. I love our potato salad. The only thing I really am not a fan of, is just because I don't like them in general, is greens. Now our greens are fresh, handmade. They're done with a homemade pork stock, but just can't get into them. so whenever we're doing quality checks, I'm always to somebody else. Oh, you test it, because I wouldn't know if they're good or not. That's my only confession. But everything else I absolutely love.
That's awesome.
Sorry, go ahead, Rick.
One of the things that I really push and try to make sure folks always are encouraged to do, and these are the 4 words I give to a lot of folks in our company, as well as young entrepreneurs starting a business or just doing things different, is always use the words yes if, never no because. It's so easy to go out and say, well, I can't do that because, we can't try this new menu item because, or we can't give a pay raise because. If you change your mindset to yes if, it totally transforms your life. And I'm so a believer in that. If you look at it and say, well, we could do a drive-through, yes, if we did X, Y, Z. I could start a business, yes, if I do this, this, and this, work on something every day. If I would have had the philosophy of no because, I would have never started City BBQ. No, I can't do City BBQ because I don't have any restaurant experience. No, I can't do City BBQ because I don't have a solid financial background in my life. It would take all the money I have. But we looked at it and said, yes, we can do it if we scrape the money together. Yes, if we build the tables ourselves. Yes, if we do some catering out of the garage. And it really creates a whole different mindset in how you think about things. And I had friends, they're great friends today, and they laugh about it, but they literally had an intervention with me back in '99 around a fire pit and trying to convince me not to start a restaurant because it would probably fail and we'd be broke. But even then I kind of said, thank you very much, but I'm going to stay with yes if, and I'm not going to let it fail. And so the biggest thing that I'd like to leave you with is with that attitude of any of our listeners. If you keep that in mind, you'll do well.
Awesome. Well, that's a great way to wrap things up. I am going to bring up one thing, because usually Rick had always a lot of times we were in a group, he was always surprised to see this, world traveled chef, eating like super, super casual stuff. But several years ago, Rick and I and another good friend had traveled up to New York. We were in talks about, whenever people were doing the burger craze, of maybe doing a burger concept together. And we had mapped out, Dave was with us, Dave with City Barbeque Conley, put together this map of all these burger places. And we were eating burgers like all day long, like burger after burger after burger. That was our R&D for the day. And then I don't know, for whatever reason, but like late at night, it was pretty late at night, we went into some bar and had a beer, and I ordered some jalapeno poppers, and Rick was just sitting there like in disbelief, like watching this world traveled chef, after eating burgers all day, just eating jalapeno poppers. So he would always give me a hard time about that and mention it. So I figured I would go ahead and do it for him.
You wanted to preempt me? You're going to preempt me on that? It was, you weren't eating them, Rich. You were pounding them like you were going to a hanging. And I was like, how does somebody at midnight still want to crush fried jalapeno poppers?
Yes. Good Lord. Yeah, it's out. It's officially out there. So, but Rick, thank you for all the years. Obviously, I've enjoyed our friendship, and, I've learned so much from watching your journey. I feel like just seeing you experience the growth and going through the hurdles that you have in the company, and how you've, even as recently as like through the pandemic, and how you navigate to still not just bring yourself, but your company, your team, mobilizing everyone to kind of navigate to see another day, and for the place to still grow, because the decisions that you're making, they're not just really impacting the trajectory of the company, but it's all the people that are stakeholders in the company, and your role has been so important. So yeah, thank you for everything that you've contributed, and again, just really have enjoyed all of our time together over the years, and thank you for spending some time with us today on the podcast.
Well, back at you, Rich. It's been a fun friendship, and candidly, I'm going to come back at you now, because you've had a heck of a journey, and your journey is still going, and just all the great things that you and the team are doing is just a blast to watch from my seat in the ballpark as well.
Thank you.
So and for all of our listeners too, is Rich is pretty good with a shotgun. He can shoot a few quails. So we do a quail hunt every year.
Yes, I've nicknamed myself the quail sniper.
Yeah.
But that's been a lot of fun as well. So looking forward to the next trip. So
yeah.
Well, awesome. Rick, thank you very much. We definitely look forward to seeing you again in person. And thank you very much. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it.